Spirituality is a language, only a way of being. And both languages describe our relationship to ourselves, to one another, to our world, and ultimately to a greater presence, however we perceive that presence. So whether we're studying science to understand who we are, or we're studying ancient wisdom and ancient traditions, for me they lead to the same path and to the same place. And in my time as a scientist, what I have found, my background's in the hard sciences. And as good as our science is today, we know it's incomplete. That the best scientists will openly admit that our science is incomplete. In many cases, our religious and spiritual traditions, as good as they are incomplete as well, because they've been changed over tremendous periods of time. So for me, as an engineer working in the defense industry, during the last years of the Cold War, watching the world come this close to doing the unthinkable, my question to myself was, how could we marry the best of the two ways of knowing, the best of science and the best of spirituality, into a greater wisdom that helps us to remember that we're a family, that we love one another, that we need one another in this world, that we are empowered in ways that we're only beginning to understand. And that ultimately is led, that's the umbrella under which all of my work falls. And the bottom line to everything we're doing is the different pieces unfold. And although they may appear to be very different from one another, prayer different from DNA, different from the magnetics of the earth, different from understanding an ancient text, what they're all saying to us, Michael, is that we are much more than we've been led to believe. We tend to live our lives within the limits of what we believe to be true about ourselves. And many of those limits come from what other people tell us, what science tells us, what religious traditions tell us, what our culture tells us, what other people tell us. And my question was, what if those beliefs are wrong? What if there's much more to who we are and our capabilities? And as we watch the greatest challenges of recorded human history unfold in front of our very eyes right now, we all sense, people all over the world have a sense that there's something more that we can do. And there's this inner yearning to understand what that is. So the bottom line to all of this work is that we now know beyond a doubt, and this isn't a wishful thinking and it's not a simple metaphor, that we truly are not limited by the laws of physics as we know them today. We're not limited in space and time. We are not limited to the laws of biology as we know them today. And when you marry those two new ways of understanding, it changes everything, because it means we are truly architects of our reality, of our bodies, of our world, and that there is an internal technology that is being birthed right now that I believe will replace the other belief systems that are falling away because they served us so well. They brought us to this point, now they no longer make sense. They're falling away, and we are literally birthing a new belief system that is, it's not purely spiritual, it's not purely scientific, it's a marriage of both. It doesn't even have a name yet, and it's probably better that it doesn't, because the moment we put a name to it, it'll have a label and it'll be in a box and somebody's going to try to own that. So all of our work is about empowering us as individuals and as a family to meet the challenges that we're seeing in our personal lives and globally in our world today. My background is as a scientist. I was trained in the hard sciences as an earth scientist, as a geologist initially, as a life scientist, strong background in biology, and as a computer scientist. And as different as those sound from what we're doing, it's interesting to me. A growing number of scientists and researchers are now viewing human consciousness as a massive computer operating system. This is the metaphor they're using. And if you look at consciousness as an operating system, then what programs that operating system are the things that we call the beliefs, and how we feel, the human emotion and how we feel about our beliefs. What the science is now showing is that there's a quality of emotion that we can hold within our hearts. It's called coherent emotion. It's not a thought, it's a feeling. And there's a power in human emotion and in our feeling that literally changes the chemistry in our bodies and changes our biology, changes the DNA in our bodies, and we'll talk more about that. and also changes the physical reality around us in ways that look very mysterious to the Western mind, because the information that we have relied upon to tell us about those things in our past has been edited tremendously over the last 2,000 years. In other cultures, that information was not edited. So the value of going into living cultures, such as in the Tibetan monasteries or the monasteries of Peru or Bolivia or Egypt, is that we find that there is a wisdom intact, a living wisdom in their culture that was once a part of ours that we lost. And as we reincorporate that piece into what we already know, it empowers us to feel empowered and to feel that we're part of, rather than separate from, the situations in our lives, whether it's our marriages and divorces or the health in our bodies or the peace between nations. It's all the same energy. So science is the underlying factor. Between 1993 and the year 2000, Western science confirmed what ancient spiritual traditions have always said, and that is, in fact, that we are bathed in a field of intelligent energy, and that this energy plays essentially three roles. It is a container for everything that we experience in our universe. It is literally the container that holds the universe. It is a bridge between our inner and outer experiences. When you have a prayer in your heart and you wonder why it can have an effect in the battlefields of Iraq with our loved ones, it's because of the way this field works. So number two, it is a bridge. Number three, it is also a mirror. This field is a living, pulsating, shimmering, glimmering essence. It's a quantum essence that mirrors in the world around us what we create in our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and emotions within us in a literal way. And this isn't figurative. It's a very different way for the Western mind to think about these things. But scientists now are finding, quantum physicists have determined that the quality of our beliefs while we are observing the world around us actually impacts and determines how the world reacts and how that world unfolds. So what's happened for almost 100 years, scientists have been doing their best to convince us that we're made of these little packets of energetic particles called quantum particles, and we believe them now. So we believe that we are a quantum essence on the one hand. Now that they're able to observe these quantum particles and see them do miraculous things like heal themselves and be instantly connected to everything, everywhere, no matter where they are, and they're not limited in space and time. Now that scientists can see the stuff we're made of has these miraculous particles, they're trying to separate us from those particles. They're saying, well, that has nothing to do with your everyday life. And the truth is, it has everything to do with our everyday life. Because my belief, and the belief of a growing number of scientists, is that rather than showing us our scientific limits, that the model and the behavior of those quantum particles are showing us our greatest potential. And what stands between us and experiencing the great potential that the universe holds for us are our beliefs. And our beliefs, we now know, are measurable quantities of energy that we can change in very precise ways to create these effects in our lives. And in doing so, we feel empowered to be part of, rather than separate from, the experiences in our lives. So this is being validated in accredited academic institutions, scientific institutions. Princeton University has done a lot of work with the Global Consciousness Project, validating that this consciousness field actually exists. We've done global prayer vigils, real-time applications of teaching people over the internet how to hold this quality of emotion in our hearts, in a given window of time. And while that is happening, hundreds of thousands of people are participating, and we can measure what's happening in major cities. The emergency hospital room visits decline, traffic accidents decline, violent crimes against people decline. And when we stop doing those things, all those statistics reverse. So while science is still struggling a little bit to make the connection, what we can say is the correlations are high. The correlations are so high between when people experience these qualities of experience inside their bodies and when the world responds outside of them, that we say there has to be an effect, and it's a direct effect. So science is certainly involved. My sense is we could study these phenomena for another 100 years, and we will, and still may not know everything. And we are faced right now with some of the greatest crises: social, political, economic, military, environmental, health crises that we've ever seen in recorded human history. And my sense is that we can take what we do know and apply it in a way that helps us to become better people, create a better world, while we are studying to understand more how these effects work. So that is the thrust of all of my work. This is the 20th year we've offered these programs and this work in one form or another. And I left the defense industry at the end of the Cold War specifically to develop this internal technology that empowers us to love and to care for one another, and to become a part of this world and feel that we are somehow participating in our ultimate destiny rather than passive observers allowing the world to happen around us and questioning the things that cause the suffering in the world. We tend to live our lives within the context of what we believe to be true. And in large part, those beliefs have either come, as we mentioned, from what current science says to us, or what ancient traditions have said, and we've relied upon the written records of our past to a large degree to validate who we are. A lot of people don't like to acknowledge that that's true in this technological world, and it is true. And what's so interesting about that is in our Western culture, there is a lineage of wisdom that links us with our past. And we know that that lineage, that chain of wisdom has been broken at least twice in recorded human history. The first time was with the burning of the Great Library in Alexandria, Egypt, when the Roman historians tell us over 532,000 documents were destroyed. Many of them were ancient in the 4th century BC. And the second time was with the editing of our biblical texts as we know them today. The very well-known Council of Nicaea in the 4th century, the year 325 AD. We know at least 25 books were completely removed, and another 20 were edited to become what we now know today as the Western Christian Bible. And as good as that document is, it's a good document. The best scholars, biblical scholars, will freely admit that it's incomplete. And the reason is because so much of this information was lost. And we know it's lost because we began recovering it with the Dead Sea Scrolls and with the Nag Hammadi Library in the 20th century, the Gnostic and the Coptic texts that were found in Egypt and in the Middle East. So when we reincorporate the wisdom that was edited for whatever reason in the 4th century, and there are a lot of speculation about why those edits occurred, but the bottom line is we lost the written keys that remind us of who we are in the universe and our relationship to this world that we live in. We've always held a sense within that there's more to us, that we are empowered in some way. On the one hand, and on the other hand, we feel helpless and powerless to do anything about the suffering in our loved ones, and we see them ravaged by diseases that are too horrible to even think about, or we see the epidemics that are happening. Africa is a beautiful example, in the Sudan, and therefore we feel powerless. We say it's too much, it's too big for us, because we have lost the information that tells us that we're a part of all of that. And now that we're reincorporating information, what we understand is that very few people can change, make a subtle shift in the way they believe. And a belief defines a thought, feeling, and an emotion. 3 separate related experiences in our bodies. And a subtle shift in the beliefs of a few create a tremendous change, a measurable change in the world around us in ways now that we're only beginning to understand and apply. And in those understandings, we are empowered, not to control or manipulate. I'm going to be very clear about that. It's not about manipulating our world, it's about participating. The physicist John Wheeler, a colleague of Einstein's from Princeton University, is still with us today. And he has stated now a radical departure from traditional physics. Historically, we believe that we're relative latecomers in the universe that happened a long time ago, and that we have very little effect in our world. And John Wheeler is saying just the opposite. He's saying it is consciousness in the act of us participating, interacting, observing the world that actually creates the stuff the universe is made of. John Wheeler is essentially saying that the universe is made of our relationship and our interaction with the world around us, that consciousness creates, is what he's saying. A radical departure from the way we've been led to believe. We work in the past, and when we marry those kinds of understandings with the actual instructions that were left in our spiritual texts that say to us things like thought, feeling, and emotion, when these three become one, when you marry thought, feeling, and emotion into a single potent force, you'll say the mountain move, and the mountain will move. Whether that's the healing of a cancerous tumor or the peace between two nations on the brink of war, it's the same energy. And these understandings allow us to participate in all of those things in ways that are very empowering, and in that way allow us to become architects of our future and our destiny, rather than simply wishing and watching, waiting to see what's going to happen. In 1986, I was an engineer working behind the scenes during the Cold War. It was a very frightening time in the history of our world, and we came about this close to doing the unthinkable and unleashing the forces of nuclear weapons on civilian populations in a way we thought was survival. It was just an insane time, absolutely insane. And it was during that time, I was developing software by day and researching these texts at night. And it made tremendous sense to me, if we were going to find, knowing that texts had been edited and distorted, if we were going to find the truth of what was left to us by our ancestors, we'd have to go to places that had been least disturbed by Western civilization, and that meant some travel. So we've found ourselves in the temples and the tombs in Egypt, in small villages in the Andes Mountains of Bolivia and Peru, in the monasteries of central China and Tibet, over 17,000 feet above sea level. Beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And it's a tough trip to get there. And the value, people asked me, they said, well, why would you take the time to go to these places? Just, go to the library and check out a book. And the thing is, when we look to a culture that is no longer with us, the temple walls in Egypt are beautiful. To some degree, we believe we know what they're saying to us. And to a large degree, we speculate, because we're not even sure we understand the hieroglyphs 100%. But when I can sit and look into the eyes of another living human who has preserved this wisdom, a Tibetan monk or a nun or an abbot, and either directly or through the translator, I can ask them the questions. I can say, when we see your prayers for 16 and 18 hours a day, and when we see you creating the miracles in your world, when we see you healing bodies in less than 3 minutes of people whose lives are going to end, when we see you doing those things on the outside, tell me what you're doing on the inside. What happened? What did you do to create that? And then I can ask them again and again until I understand very clearly what it is they're saying to me. And what they're saying is essentially what Western science has found. They're saying that what they call prayers are based in the power of human emotion, the very power that has been discouraged, especially in males in Western civilization, the very power that is contained in the texts that were edited from our Bible in the 4th century, the very texts that discourage us from experiencing that power of emotion. And what the ancients say, it's the most powerful force in the universe. That it's the feeling and the emotion in our bodies as physical beings that the angels in the heavens cannot experience, because they don't have bodies to experience them in. So however you want to look at it, whether it's from a scientific perspective, showing that the observer is changing the reality of the physical world, or from the spiritual perspective, saying that what you feel in your body is your prayer. Either way you're looking at it, they're saying essentially the same thing. And that's the value of going to these places. Because the scientists now are beginning to understand, hey, there's a field out there, that's acknowledged. Hey, our observation is affecting the field, and what happens, that's acknowledged, and they're saying, what do we do with it? And you go into the ancient traditions, and they begin where we've just arrived. They say, oh, sure, there's a field out there. My Native friends, I remember the first day I shared this story with a Native American friend of mine I've known for years. And I said, they just made the announcement in the scientific journals. They found a field of energy that connects everything and all of creation. And I was very animated and very excited. He looked at me and he said, so, we're glad you figured it out. They already come from that place, and then they take us the next step. They say, not only does that field exist, here's how you use it. Here's how you apply it in your life. Here's how you make your village or your community a better place to live in your world. So for me, it makes tremendous sense, Michael, to honor our past in both ways of knowing, scientific, spiritual, to give both the same consideration, because they're us coming to terms with who we are in this universe. Honor our past and listen to what our ancestors were saying to us, because they spent tremendous amounts of time. They built entire temples and libraries and stories dedicated to handing a wisdom to the people of their future that they could only imagine in their minds. I mean, they could only imagine who would be here 2,000, 3,000 years from now. They had something to say to us. And it makes tremendous sense to me to understand what they said and marry that with what we have found to be true into a greater wisdom. And I know there are other authors who feel that there's a danger in doing this, that there's a danger in bridging science and spirituality. And I understand their thinking. That their thinking is that if we link spirituality with science as it is today, that we'll get stuck. And if you're looking at a static science, I would agree with that. There's a hierarchy in the sciences that define our world today. It begins with physics. All sciences are based upon what we know about physics, and from physics, chemistry evolves, and from that, biology, and from that, the life and the mental health sciences. And there's a disconnect today, because what has happened is physics changed in the last 70 years from a mechanical view of the world to an energetic view. The other sciences are lagging. They're making progress, and they haven't quite got there yet. On the one hand. On the other hand, we're looking to these sciences to solve the problems of our world and of our bodies. So the spirituality, to me, is a bridge that marries the sciences. And science is a bridge that marries the different spiritual traditions into a greater wisdom. We can call it whatever we'd like to call it. But I think that's the value of going into these ancient cultures, because they've got a pure lineage of wisdom that hasn't changed, and they've held that over time in a language that doesn't make sense to us, hasn't in the past. And we've got science that's only about 300 years old that is good, it's incomplete. So you marry those two together and we've got a new belief system, a new way of looking at our role in the universe. Since the mid-1950s, when the double helix was discovered as the form of DNA, DNA has been called the language of life, and it's been a metaphor. It's been used as a metaphor. There was can I tell you a short story? In the 19th century, there was an archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann who read a book called the Iliad by Homer, and that was believed to be a metaphor, a fictional story of the forces between good and evil and light and dark. And he read this book and he asked himself the question, he said, what if this isn't fictional? What if it's a literal account of something that actually happened? What if we followed the clues that were left in the Iliad? Where would it lead us? And to make a long story very brief, he did precisely that, and it led him to a mound of earth that he and a team excavated. And in that mound, they found that 9 layers, 9 levels of 9 cities that had never been known to exist before. And on the 9th layer, they found the ancient gates of the city of Troy. And we knew for the first time that Troy was a real city, and that Trojan War was a real war, and that there was a Trojan horse in the hell end of Troy. And all he did was follow the literal clues. Ancient traditions have been left to us that are said to literally describe the way a greater force created the universe and our bodies. And those texts are very mystical, and they've been believed to be metaphors. My question as an engineer was, what if we take those texts literally, just like Heinrich Schliemann took the Iliad literally? What if we took the instructions in the ancient Sefer Yetzirah, for example, the 3rd mystical book of the Kabbalah? It's only 1,000 lines long, and it's as if an observer were watching God create the universe and our bodies and taking notes. I said, my question was, what if it's a literal description? What if we take that description and marry it to the best science, marry those two kinds of knowing into greater wisdom, where would it lead us? And the bottom line is that by following those clues, what we found is there is a numeric link, a mathematic code that links the DNA of all life in every cell of our bodies, everything from a blade of grass to a hamster to a goldfish. It links the DNA of all life to the letters of ancient alphabets in a very precise way. And this is a very bizarre way of looking at DNA, but what it says is that because of this mathematic link, we can take the letters of those alphabets and place them into the strand of DNA in precise places. And when we do that, following those instructions, lo and behold, the DNA begins to spell words, and the words begin to spell sentences, and the sentences make sense. And while we don't know precisely who or what is responsible for that code in our bodies, what it says to us is, number one, it says that we're here on purpose. We're no fluke of nature. We're no accident of biology. We are an intentional species. And that there is a message encoded. It's not on a temple wall or in a text somewhere that could crumble after a few thousand years. It's in the creation itself. There is a literal message, and the very first line of that message literally translates into the languages of ancient biblical Hebrew, ancient Arabic, and ancient Sanskrit. Precisely the same language literally says to us the words, God eternal within the body. God eternal within the body. It's like the introduction to a book. Every cell in our bodies has the genetic material in the very first level of the code. It's the same for all of us. It doesn't say who God is or where God came from. We're now working with the deeper layers to find out precisely what God eternal within the body means. This is very controversial, as you can imagine. It's very empowering, because I believe that the fact, and it is a fact, it's not a theory. If you follow the instructions, this message is there. We can't say why it's there. It simply is there. The fact that that message is there tells us that we are here on purpose. We're an intentional creation. We're part of one another in all life. And what that means, and probably part of something greater that we are beginning to understand. And what that says to us is that the differences that have led to the great wars of our past, including the wars of the 20th century, those differences suddenly become obsolete in the presence of this. It says at the most fundamental level of our existence, we're not so different after all. And my prayer is that as we are able to reveal the deeper layers of what this message in the cells of all life says, we'll know more about what that means in our lives. So it's a very different way of looking at DNA. I didn't know what we would find. It was a 12-year-long research project that began when I was an engineer during the last years of the Cold War. And it was intentional for me. I thought, if we were going to find a principle that transcends our differences, that would help us maybe never have this kind of war again, where would we look for that principle? Are we going to look in a book or on a rock? And I said, let's look into life itself. Of course, in the 80s, we didn't know about DNA, what we know now, so it's taken that long. It's an ongoing project. The code exists in many layers. Each layer has its own code to unlock that layer. Whoever put this there wanted to make sure we understood really clearly how this works. So I've had to work with a team of geneticists, linguists, historians, translators, because I'm no expert in those fields. I'm taking what I do know to bring it together, and then they are validating or clarifying or showing me where it's wrong or where we're thinking about things wrong. So in a nutshell, the message in all life, God eternal within the body, says to us that we're perhaps greater than we've ever imagined in the past. We're part of a greater presence, and that we're empowered to transcend the laws of physics. If we're God within the body, why would we be bound by the laws of physics, or why would we be bound by the laws of biology? Those are relative laws. If we're God within the body, and it has nothing to do with religion. From my perspective, this is purely information, empowering information, helping us to understand who we are in the world. As we see the belief systems falling away that have led us into the 21st century, my feeling is that a new belief will have to be in place to support who we are and what we do believe. And I can imagine nothing greater than understanding that we truly are empowered to love and care for one another on almost infinite terms, and that we transcend the limits that we've believed in the past. And what a beautiful place to begin a new belief system in terms of who we are. So I'm very passionate about this work. I left a successful career in defense and aerospace to pursue this, and all the other work supports this in some way. The bottom line is it's just about helping us to become hopefully who we are and create a better world. The book was sent out for review. The God Code book went out for review. It went to clergy and Catholic traditions, Protestant traditions, Native American, Islamic, Mormon Church, across the board. And they are very different from one another, obviously. All the feedback that we got was that they believed that this work supported their tradition. And to me, that was a beautiful sign that we've cut through the distortions to something that's true. The bottom line is that for all those traditions, is we are here on purpose and we're part of a greater existence. And that's what this message says. The details that have developed over the centuries and the distortions, we look past those. Yes, I've seen a change. It's so huge, sometimes it takes a while to sink in. I was with some very serious European audiences, really serious note-taking audiences. Good people, really great people. I like to take my programs overseas first, and what I know is if I can express an idea clearly to a foreign audience through a translator, then I'll probably be able to do it well with our friends here at home. And so I asked a question. I said, what would it mean to you? What would it mean to find a message encoded into the cells of your body? And they were quiet just for a moment, and the Europeans said, well, Greg, it depends on what the message says. You know, and I'm saying, we haven't got that far yet. I'm just asking you, what would it mean if it was there? Not what does it say, but the fact that the message is there, what would that mean? It's such a huge concept. And the idea of somehow creating letters of the alphabet out of the sticky, gooey protoplasmic stuff that we're conditioned to think of as life is a disconnect for a lot of people. But it's all based in numbers. Western science, our science today, describes all life as the elements of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. Those are words. And there are numbers that go with those that we can describe on the periodic table. Ancient texts did exactly the same thing. They described life through words. And what we know now is for every one of those letters in the ancient alphabets, in every alphabet, there's a very precise numeric link. And those numbers are what match the scientific way of knowing. And if it sounds complex, it's my inability to make it very simple because it's so eloquent and it's so beautiful and it's so simple and it's right there. And all we do is follow the instructions in a 5,000-year-old text, use our science and some computers, and there's a message in the DNA. And we'll see where it goes from there. When I was an engineer, what I found was that engineers felt that they were left out of the conversation of spirituality, and because the language made no sense to an engineer. And I wrote a little book, it was a workbook called Awakening to Zero Point, in engineering terms to describe what's happening, what I saw happening in the late 1980s. And it caught on and was Xerox copied and ended up becoming its own book and its own phenomenon. And it described what we knew then. And for the most part, it's pretty accurate. There's some things that have changed. The bottom line was that within the changes that we are all feeling in our lives, as we look for reasons, say, what in the world is going on? You know, what's happening with the weather? What's happening? It seems like everybody's going to war. What's happening with my body? I don't sleep the way I used to, or my relationships have gotten really intense. As different as those all seem from one another, they're all related. What we know is that technically, and when I was a geologist, I could see this happening. The magnetic field of the Earth is in decline. It has been for the last 2,000 years. It looks like a chart on the New York Stock Exchange on a bad day. It started declining, it's never gone back. So we're at the lowest point in planetary magnetics now that we have been in the last 2,000 years. We have seen Earth have this experience in the geologic record. We've seen this happen at least 14 times in the last 4.5 million years. And every time it happens, it precedes a flip, a 180-degree reversal of the magnetic field. So they get weaker and weaker. The magnetic fields decline. They get weaker and weaker and weaker until they drop to zero for a period of a few days, it looks like. Then the field reverses, and what used to be North Pole is South, South Pole becomes North, and the fields begin to get stronger and stronger and stronger. The last time this happened looked like it was around maybe 9 to 11,000 years ago. At that time, we saw the melting of the last ice age. A lot of people believe Atlantis was here during that time. And as the ice melted, oceans rose, and that's why we don't see the continent of Atlantis anymore. There's a whole program we could do on that. We know that those fields are declining. We know that that's a fact. The scientists have believed that it's linear, that you can know where it was 50 years ago and know where it is today and draw a straight line and say this is where it's going to be. Based on that, they say it's about another 2,000 years before we go into a zero reversal. We know, however, that it is not linear. It's what's called a geometric decline, and what that means is that as the field declines, it declines quickly. Ancient calendars point to our time in history, the Mayan calendar, the Egyptian calendar, native oral traditions, both in North-South America and the Tibetan traditions. They all say that something is happening at our time in history, and this is when time as we know it changes, and that the Earth as we know it changes. So scientists only within the last couple of years, mainstream publications have now admitted, they say, yes, we are in the early stages of a magnetic reversal. We don't know what that means. What we do know is that we're linked to those fields. Our emotions, our sleep patterns, our perceptions of time and space, how we feel about our relationships, our immune response, all those things are linked to the magnetic fields of the Earth, as well as the weather patterns. And this is something a lot of people aren't talking about. So the decrease of the magnetics is what is driving the weather patterns and the shifts that we're seeing right now, including global warming and those kinds of things. So we know those are happening, and they are giving us an opportunity. I think they're giving us an opportunity to know ourselves in the presence of conditions that are unlike what we've lived in the past. And what that means is it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate our mastery of who we really are in this universe, in this reality. Because in that mastery, those changes come much easier to us. It's in our resistance to our mastery, those changes are tough. So when we feel that we're limited beings, and that our health is so very fragile, and that the way that we live is so fragile. It is in some respects. In other respects, it's a direct mirror of what's happening inside of our bodies. So that was one parameter, the magnetics. The second was there's the fundamental heartbeat of the Earth that the ancients talked about. The scientists first detected this in 1899. It's measured a number of different ways, but the bottom line is we know that fundamental heartbeat is speeding up. And we all know that because everyone says time is speeding up. Every country I've been to, people say it seems like time is speeding up. Why is that? Every cell in our body is in resonance, trying to keep time with the heartbeat of our Mother Earth. And as that heartbeat increases, our cells are trying to metabolize and maintain their existence and match that increase, and we perceive that change as time speeding up. So to us, it feels like things are going faster because they are in that respect. Those two parameters together are physical parameters that can be measured that tell us where we are at this time in history. And all I can say right now is we've got very low magnetics, and the pulse of the planet is twice what it was in the mid-1980s. And we're not sure where that's going to go. But I also have to say, I know people who spend all of their time preparing for the moment that the world changes, whether it's burying boxcars of food in their backyard or building a shelter, that will protect them from whatever. And if people feel good about that, I think it's probably a good thing to do. My experience is, if you spend your life preparing for all the bad things, you miss life. And by living the life that crosses our paths and honoring those changes, when the frightening things happen to us, honor that fear and go through what the ancient traditions suggest that we go through to transcend that fear. And as we do that, it changes our bodies, and in that change, we've already prepared for whatever the earth is going to bring. Because as we change our beliefs, we are tuning our bodies to that pulse of the earth and to those magnetics. So rather than resist those things, the changes in the earth and the changes in our lives are the same, rather than separate, as some people would like to keep them separate. It's easier to think of them that way. We're made out of the same stuff the earth is made of. The same elements of the earth, nothing more, nothing less. And if our earth, our Mother Earth, is going through a magnetic shift and a pulse change, then that means we're going through it as well. We are tuned, we are in resonance. We've got tiny magnetic particles in our brain that tune us to the magnetic fields of the earth, just like all other animals do. We discount ours historically, and scientists now know that they're there. So the earth changes are our changes, and they're being mirrored in our bodies. If we understand that, then there's a beautiful system that's unfolding. If we don't understand that, then a mysterious change is happening that we try to address medically and maybe suppress. And it's just about honoring who we are and knowing who we are. It brings us back to the first question. We're more than the laws of physics and biology have ever led us to believe. And there's a power within us that transcends those limits, and it's that power that empowers us to participate in a beautiful change in our planet and a beautiful change in our bodies, to become the greatest potential of who we are, rather than live in the limits of what we've always believed. I do believe in life after death, and I believe that death is probably not what we've always believed it is. It's a continuation. The evidence is overwhelming. Scientific evidence, anecdotal evidence as well, cultural evidence, that we are part of this field that is now being called the divine matrix, that this field of energy, when I talk about that field of energy, what I've found is people tend to think of it as being somewhere else. So if we can think of this field of energy that bathes creation as a big thick blanket with lots of fibers, and you and me and everyone listening to this and our lives, our world, are all within the fibers of that blanket. And it's a relatively smooth field of energy, and every once in a while it crystallizes into a rock or a tree or a human or a river. It helps us to kind of get a sense that we're part of that field. What we know is that consciousness crystallizes quantum possibilities into the physical realities of our world. And these bodies are physical realities. When the bodies are gone, that consciousness is still there as a quantum possibility, a quantum reality. And it appears, the evidence I think is overwhelming that we continue and cycle through that way. So the answer is yes. Maybe not in the way that you and I are having a conversation in this moment, but the essence that's Michael or the essence that's Gregg, I think will be around for a while.